Guys, welcome back to week 3 of the art of calligraphy. So I hope you've been practicing all your lowercase and now uppercase letters. Practice, practice, practice. And when you think you've really gotten to a stage, you practice your name, your mom's name, your sister's name, every person on the street you know's name. You've really gotten in a rhythm. Maybe it's time to do an envelope or a finished piece as a gift. So we'll talk about that today. But first, before we get into that, I want to show a little bit of the connection of letters and flourishes, and then we'll do an envelope and a quick quote. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, last time I went over connecting words, and you just do a little uptick at the end of your letter, so they all connect like this, and then you would leave a space a little bit bigger than the size of a letter, and do your next word. And what I want to talk about now is flourishes. You see with the D and the H, I have made some differences from our original H was just the simple H like this. But this time I'm using something to lean backward, because once you have the basic alphabet, you can then flourish it in a bunch of different ways, right? And that you can just get into and look at a bunch of different examples and look up different variations of italic capitals. There's many different variations of italic capitals, right? So I had taught you the capital T, just the plain one like this, but there's one that has, you could even almost add a little thing at the bottom, looks a little fancier, and actually then if I do an H, look how much fancier that is for the versus just the classic, right? And then sometimes if you get wild, you can actually, looking at the thing you're trying to do, and you got to make sure with your flourishes you don't get so out of control that it distracts from the writing. But let's see, with this one, let's say I do the D like this, and then I'm actually doing something that comes into the D like that. Or I can curve around like this. These need a little bit of practice and to look at what the quote is, but that's how I like this end of a word with this coming out right like that. And you can do a lot of variations like that, which can make your piece quite pretty. Okay, it's time for us to try doing an envelope. Now this is sort of a large envelope, but that's okay because our nib is sort of large. We're using the Pilot Parallel pen, remember the 3.8, so it's sort of large. So okay, so I want to do an envelope, and I want to make it nice, sending it to my friend, Sally Smith. Now, it's sort of fun when you're doing an envelope, instead of just writing all the normal things at the same width and the same size, it's sort of fun to maybe make some huge name and then the address. So I'm going to make a little bit of a curve here with my pencil that I'm going to write the name of my friend on. And then I can erase this later. So I have my pen, my Pilot Parallel pen I'm still using. There we go. So we have that nice green ink we've been using. And there we go. We've got her name, Sally Smith. That looks good. And I've left room to put my postage stamp. And I've also left room to put a return address. Although with the envelope, you can always put the return address in the upper left-hand corner, or you can put it on the back. So, wrote her name. That looks super cool, right? And so then I want to put her address like underneath, maybe sort of underneath this end. I think that'll be sort of fun. What a fun letter to get. But I'm going to use a different size nib for the address. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to use a different color to make it a little more interesting. So here's what I'm going to show you with this. I'm going to show you actual ink. So I've got a orange Ziller ink here, and I've got a metal nib in a, I don't know if you can see, it's a metal nib in a plastic holder. And this is what I use for most of my work because These Pilot Parallel pens are excellent for practice, excellent for doing a lot of different things. But once you get, you know, we want to do the final piece, you're going to up your game with your supplies and maybe get some nibs. This is a brows nib. It's very small. You can see much smaller than the width of our Parallel Pens nib. So, got the holder, got my nib in there. I'm going to dip it in the ink, get rid of a little excess ink, and write her address. So, she lives at 4202 Acorn. And this is fun because I did this in a nice orange, something different than the green. Acorn Drive. And she lives in Alexandria. Sometimes it's best if you're doing your first envelope that you write it out on a practice sheet of paper so you can get a good idea of the size. Because you don't want to get here to this point and then be stuck with nowhere to go and think, oh, for goodness sakes. And I used to do that a lot when I was younger. When I was young and in grade school, I would just be so excited to try out my new talents that I would run out of room and do all kinds of stuff. So people probably got some pretty crazy envelopes for me. So there she is. She lives in Alexandria, Virginia. Two, 2, 3, 1, 4. And then you can write your return address up here. And if I write my return address in this one on the front, I would do it in the same orange small thing as I did down there. Right? That's a pretty fun envelope. And I would do the same return address up here. Okay, so I wrote my return address on there. And I've got my address. And actually, looking back on it, I do have a lot of space down here. If I were to do this again, I might have lowered it a little bit. But I think this looks like a really fine envelope. And I showed two different types. You can see how this I did a flourish that went to the side like I did for Sally. And then here I did a different one that came back around and joined. And the ends are different too. So you can see how there's different variations, but keeping with the same style. And then once it is dried, you want to invest in a good eraser. This is the Coom Ultra Clean Super Soft Erasing. It's it only costs $1, but it's worth every penny. So then you take this when you are sure that it is dry, and then you erase all your lines. And then you have an envelope that Sally's going to be so happy to get. Okay, so now it's time to maybe do a finished piece. You got to put a little bit of thought into this. We're not just going to sit down and start doing it like we were doing our practice. You know, my grandfather always said, measure twice, cut once. We're going to have to figure this out to make a nice piece because we're probably using nicer paper than we have used in our practice. Because for the practice, you can just use inkjet printer paper. But now you want to use a nicer paper with maybe a higher cotton quality content. Drawing paper that you can get from an art supply store works great. Sometimes cardstock is not so great. You think it's going to be great, but your ink will bleed, and you don't want that. So you want watercolor paper works well. So you want to figure out your paper, and you got your pen and your materials, and then you want to think about what the layout is going to be like, what size it's going to be. If you're going to make it for someone where you want to put it in a frame, sometimes it's best to figure out the size of that frame that they could just easily buy at the store, a classic size like 5 by 7 or 11 by 14, And you also want to then lay out and sketch it out with a paper and pencil to see which way you're going with this. And for that, you want to think about a bunch of things like the shape and position of the quote, the direction of the text, all kinds of things. And so let's go over that now with a simple quote here. Okay, let's work on doing a quote, a little piece. So I've sketched it out. The quote I'm going to do is, "Be still and know that I am God," Psalm 46. So I've sketched it out. I think I'm going to do "be still" in the italic, like we know, and then "and know that I am" is going to be in Roman, which is just sort of the classic, what we would consider just classic writing, uppercase writing. And then God. And I was thinking I would do the psalm on the edge of the God, right? So I did a few practice ones because that's key. You want to do a little bit of practice on the side to really get it right and discover where you want the words. So I wrote it out here and I just did a funny flourish so I can figure out where I'm going to do my flourishes and know that I am God. And I wrote this in here. You want to practice it a few times, practice, 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 and then you're going to draw on your piece of paper, the better piece of paper, where you want this, okay? And it's a good idea to really do an exact copy of what you're doing so you know where to start. You don't want to drop your pen on your paper. That's a mistake. That is a mistake right there. So, and you want to start your, like, maybe "be still" right here, "be still." So you're hoping to end it right here on the same side. And then you're going to know that you want to make sure that you're sort of doing it at the right starting points and stopping points. Okay, I'm ready to do my finished piece here. So I'm just really speeding this up. This takes a lot longer, but since this is a video, I don't need to be every stage with me here. I'm just trying to show you that you should do a pencil one. Then you should write it out quite a few times to make sure you've got your writing perfect. Then you got your final paper. And when you're doing your final one, sometimes it can make you nervous to do the absolute final one, but I'll tell you, just like with everything, that if you've practiced enough, you will feel a lot better about it. And who cares? In the beginning, just a few of your ones that you're fooling around with, you can just give to your mom. You know, pin it up on her mirror. I'm sure she'd like it even if you're practicing. I mean, I know that my family members over the years have taken little scraps of things I was practicing and saved them because hey, it's better than a handwritten note, and you could just write a handwritten note, right? So, and then with the Romans here, and know that I am oops, I gotta move up a little bit here. Be still and know that I am God. So this is just a quick one I'm doing just to show you guys, you know, a few things. But be still and know that I am God. And then I think what I would do is, first of all, still working on this, but I would write the Psalm 46, 10 in that little curve. And also, I guess I would figure out, and now this is not my finest one, but I would figure out some way to add to God, because God is really the thing we want to focus on in this quote, right? So fun project you could do is a circle like this, and it looks really pretty with italic. So if you take your compass from school, your ordinary compass, and you draw a circle with pencil, and then you go around and do the letters like this, you erase your circle. This would make a really nice thank you card. The ascenders and descenders look really nice. And you can see on this one here, I was using the pen we've been using, but then halfway through I changed the cartridge. So it went from a lighter green, and you can see it coming into a darker green. That's another idea too. Now, I changed the cartridge, and then it wasn't totally out, so I had to do a little bit of writing on a side page. So if you wanted to change quickly, you're going to have to write on this side. But that's another idea. Here are some examples to show you how people used contrast, either the color and size and placement of the letters, to convey their meaning better. So here's a piece by Timothy Botts, and it's super simple. You see the italic with a little bit of flourish, but he used color to highlight the words very precious, and then it sort of fades away there. This is a really nice simple piece that shows how you can see the direction of the text. You can see the contrast of the color, which helped that piece. Here's another one by Timothy Botts. Now this is really powerful because the Gothic font, which is the strength of the Lord came upon Samson, is in a Gothic font, which is another flat nib font, which we will talk about next week, is the anchor of this piece. And then you see the italic is light and very flourishy, and it describes the rest of the situation. It's sort of nested in the strong Gothic font. It's really nice. And then lastly, you can see another example. This is by Sheila Waters, and she pulled out the heart of this piece, which is the first time ever I saw your face, is in uncial, which is another flat nib font. You can use your pen to do all of these. And I will talk about this next week, but I don't think I'm going to do a tutorial in it, but I will talk about it. And then you can see that the italic is for the rest of it, except for certain words that she wanted to stand out, like sun, joy, time. Actually, those are still in italic, but they have little flourishes that make them stand out. And the color is also really cool too. And you can see she sort of nested in the author there in the corner, and this was for an anniversary. Anyway, those are some really good examples to whet your palette to get going on some fun quotes. So keep on practicing, do some envelopes, maybe do your favorite quote, and then I'll see you next week for the last installment of The Art of Calligraphy. See you then. Bye.